Hello, friends. In this lesson, we're going to talk about narrative verb forms. A narrative is basically just a story. So these will be verb forms that we typically use when we're telling a story. And there are quite a variety of verb forms that we can use, and even more than I'm going to talk about in this video. But in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the most common forms that you'll see when somebody is telling a story or that you might hear. And we're going to look at their form and their function, starting with the most basic and common ones first, and then working into the more complicated ones. So first, let's look at the core forms, or the most common ones. First, we've got the past simple. Now, the past simple is the one that is used the most in talking about the past. And it's just a general statement about the past. And for the past simple, it could take a couple of different forms. First, we've got the D or the ED ending on verbs, or we can have an irregular form. So the past simple, it's a little bit complicated when we're talking about the form of the verb. So we've got these regular verbs that have D or ED, like I married my wife 17 years ago. So we see the ED ending there. We take marry and we change the Y to I and add ED. But then we've got this next sentence. It was a warm October day. So was is an irregular form of the be verb. So this would be classified under irregular, and then married would be what we call a regular form of the past tense. So when we're using the past simple, you could see either regular ED verbs or irregular verbs. For the irregular verbs, you've just got to learn what their irregular form is for the past simple. And again, this is the most common form used, which means that when you're reading something talking about the past, usually more than 50% of the verbs will be in the past simple. The next one is the past progressive. So the past progressive is the helping verb was or were, and the main verb will have the ing ending. For example, the leaves were already changing color. We use this verb form to talk about a background action or a continuing action in the past. So here in the example sentence, the leaves were already changing color. This is talking about something that was happening when I married my wife. So we're talking about our wedding day. The leaves were already changing color. So the leaves were changing color over a period of a few weeks, but the wedding day was only one day during that few weeks. So here, the leaves changing color is what we call a background action. It's something that happens before and after a main action in the past. We often see the past progressive used together with a past simple verb. So for here in this sentence, the leaves were already changing color. We could add when we had our wedding. And in this, we would just use a past simple verb. Sometimes we can use two past progressives together when we're talking about two actions that happened at the same time in the past. The next verb form is the past perfect. So the past perfect will have the word had as the helping verb, and then the main verb will be the past participle form, which is sometimes the same as the past simple form when it's an ED verb. Sometimes it's different. So if we're looking at an irregular verb, if a verb is irregular in the past simple, it will also be irregular in the past participle. Sometimes they're the same and sometimes they are different. For example, we've got the verb go. So go is the base form of the verb. But when we talk about the past simple, it changes to went. And when we talk about the past participle, the verb is gone. So we can see from the base form to the past simple form to the past participle form, we have three different forms of this verb go. So go, went, and gone. The past participle form is what we would use for the past perfect or any of the perfect forms. For example, we had only known each other for a year and a half when we got married. The reason we use the past perfect when we're telling a story is we use it to talk about something that happened before another thing in the past. So two things happened in the past, one thing happened before the other thing. So for the thing that happened first, we will use the past perfect. For the thing that happened second, we will usually use the past simple. So when we look at the example sentence, we had only known each other. So had and known, that's the past perfect. These two together are forming the past perfect. So we had only known each other for a year and a half, and then I added when we got married. So when we got married, if you look here, to get married or got married, this is the past simple form. So what happened first? We knew each other for a year and a half first, and then we got married after that. So we knew each other happened first, so we use past perfect for that one. We got married happened second, so we use the past simple for that one. And that's when we usually use the past perfect. But we don't have to have this part of the sentence. That's why I put it in parentheses. So we can just use the past perfect in a sentence because we're expecting that the reader knows the other thing that we're comparing it to. The next one here is the past perfect progressive. So this one is kind of like the past perfect and it's kind of like the past progressive. But we use it for talking about a continuing situation that happened before another thing in the past. So it's like the past perfect because we're talking about one thing happened first and then another thing happened second, but they both happened in the past. And we're using the past perfect progressive to talk about a continuing situation that happened first. To do this, we use had been plus the ing form of the main verb. For example, for a year before our marriage, we had been living on opposite sides of the world. So for a year before our marriage, a year before our wedding day. So that is a continuing situation for 1 year. We had been living on opposite sides of the world. So our marriage, this was the second thing that happened. We had been living on opposite sides of the world. That was the first thing that happened. So this one happened first in the past, and it was a continuing situation. The marriage happened second, and that was a short action because that's 1 day, right? So we can use it for something that was a continuing situation, but it happened before something else in the past. Now let's look at some of the modal forms that we talk about the past. So this gets a little bit trickier because some of these modal words can be used for different things. And they're not only used for the past. So you have to use these in a specific context for them to mean what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about past ability, we can use was or were able to plus the base form of a verb. For example, we were able to plan most of our wedding by phone and by internet because our family was able to do most of the work. So here we were able to, and then our main verb is plan. And then our family was able to, and then the main verb is do. So here the main verb is plan, here the main verb is do. And both of these are talking about the ability to do something in the past. If we're talking about the present, we would say am able to, is able to, or are able to. What makes this past ability is the form that the helping verb here is taking, was and were. Was and were is in the past, so this is past ability. We can also use the verb, the modal verb could, to talk about past ability, but I think was and were able to is probably more common. So with could, we use could plus, again, the base form of the verb. With all of these modal forms, we're going to be using the base form of the verb. So, for example, we couldn't plan the wedding. We couldn't plan the wedding in person because we both lived in different places from where the wedding was going to be. So couldn't plan is talking about our ability to not do something in the past. We didn't have the ability to do it. That's why it's negative here. So we talk about the ability to do something in the past, but I'm making it negative in this sentence because we didn't have that ability. Now, when we're talking about the future in the past, we have a couple of ways that we can do this. So this means that we are talking about the past, but we are imagining the future in the past. So when we're using this one, it could be something that's already happened, but from the perspective or the standpoint of the past, it was in the future. What does that mean? So if we look at the example sentence here, we couldn't plan it in person. We couldn't plan the wedding in person because we both lived in different places from where the wedding was going to be. There's my future, right? So the future and the past, we use was or were. That's the what makes it past. And then going to, that's what makes it in the future, plus the base form of the verb. So the wedding was going to be. The reason we're using that here is because we were planning the wedding, right? We were planning it before the wedding happened. So the planning was happening before the wedding. The wedding hadn't happened yet. So the wedding was going to be in the future. So we couldn't plan it in person because we both lived in different places from where the wedding was going to be. So when we're thinking about the time when we were planning, then the wedding was still in the future. It hadn't happened yet. So that's why we're using the future in the past there. So this one is to talk about something that happens after something else in the past. Another future in the past form that we use is would plus the base form of the verb. For example, I lived in Japan and my wife lived in Nebraska, but the wedding would be in Minnesota where our families lived. And this is similar to the meaning of this sentence. We couldn't plan in person because we both lived in different places from where the wedding was going to be. So I lived in Japan and my wife lived in Nebraska, but the wedding would be in Minnesota. So we're using the future in the past here because we're still thinking about the planning that we're talking about. So the wedding hasn't happened yet in what we're talking about in the past here. So we use would be because we're talking about the wedding day, which was still in the future when we were planning. So we had the planning stage, and then we had the wedding, and then we have now, like this. So when I'm talking about it now, which is the present. But what am I talking about? I'm talking about planning, and I'm imagining that we're here in this place. And from this place, we're talking about this. So this is in the future. Still, the wedding is in the future. So if I'm thinking about being here in the past, then the wedding's in the future. So I'm using either would be or was or were going to be to talk about the future in the past. Now, when we're talking about necessity in the past, something that we have to do, then we use had to plus the base form of the verb. So all we're doing is we're changing have to into had to, and had to is in the past. So for example, because we wouldn't be there until just a few days before the wedding, we had to make sure everything was planned and ready. So we had to make sure this was necessary for us to do. Everything was planned and ready. So we use this form to talk about something that was necessary in the past. If we want to talk about past routine, we can use a couple forms. The first one is used to, and then we use that with the base form of the verb. So even though we lived on opposite sides of the world, my wife and I used to talk on the phone for over an hour every day. So used to talk, this means that it was a regular or normal thing that happened regularly in the past. So we use used to plus the base form of the verb to talk about something that was normal or routine in the past. It wasn't something that happened just one time. We can also use would. So used to and would work almost the exact same way. We can't use all of the same verbs with would that we would use with used to. So used to is more common because we can use it with pretty much any verb, but would, we can only use it with certain verbs, which I don't have time to get to in this lesson. Now, so would, for example, in fact, I would spend over $200 a month on phone cards because we talked so much. So would spend, I could also say used to spend. I used to spend over $200 a month on phone cards. This is before Skype and Zoom and all that. So you had to buy phone cards in order to talk long distance and not pay a ton of money. But it was still a ton of money because we would spend hours every day talking to each other on the phone. So we use would in the past to talk about something that was normal or routine. Now here's a fun one because it can do a few different things, and that's the modal should. So should plus the base form of the verb. We can use should to talk about past expectation, past suggestion, or past decision. For example, we decided we should do the wedding in October and have it outside because the leaves should be beautiful colors. So you can see I used should twice here for a little bit different reasons. So we decided we should do the wedding in October. So here the should is like a decision that we had made in the past. Because the leaves should be beautiful colors, here this should is talking about what we expected to happen in the past. So if somebody makes a decision or a suggestion in the past, we can use should. Or if we're expecting something to happen in the past, we can use should. We can also use these to talk about the future too, but in this video we're just focusing on the past. So we can use should to talk about something that was expected or suggested in the past or a decision that was made. Now we're going to look at the really crazy ones, and these are the hypothetical forms. So the word hypothetical means that it's something imaginary. It's something that didn't happen, but we're thinking about the possibility that it could have happened. So for this, you'll hear Americans say woulda, shoulda, coulda. When we're talking about the past and you're like, oh no, I should have done this, I should have done that, somebody will say, well, woulda, shoulda, coulda, which means that you didn't do it or it didn't happen, even though you wish it did or you could have done it. And the woulda, shoulda, coulda is short for would have, could have, should have. So could have, we use this to talk about past possibility. For example, since we had to plan everything long distance, our wedding could have turned out really bad. So could have, that's our modal, and then turned out, that's the main verb. So turn out means to result, to have a specific result. So it could have turned out really bad, which means that it didn't actually turn out bad. The wedding turned out good. It turned out really good. But we're saying that because we had to plan everything long distance, it was possible that it might have been bad. So we use this to talk about something that was a possibility in the past, but it didn't actually happen. Would have plus the base form of the verb. We use this to talk about future possibility in the past. So again, it's imaginary, it's hypothetical. So for example, because our wedding was outside in October in Minnesota, it would have been uncomfortable if it was really cold or if it rained. So thinking about, since we had to plan everything long distance, the wedding could have turned out really bad. How could it have turned out bad? It could have been really uncomfortable, or it would have been if it was cold or if it rained. So it would have been is the possibility of what might have happened in the past, but it didn't actually happen. So we use would have to talk about future possibility in the past. May have or might have plus the past simple of the base form. We're using the past participle with these would have and could have and should have and may and might have. So with these modals, we're using the past participle of the verb because we have as one of the helping verbs there. So it's almost like the present perfect and the past perfect because we're using the past participle. So since it was October in Minnesota, it might have even snowed. Thankfully, the weather was beautiful, 70 degrees and sunny. So may have or might have, we use this for past possibility or speculation. So speculation means you're just thinking about all of the different possibilities. So here, since it was October in Minnesota, it might have even snowed. Might have means that I didn't expect it to happen, but it was a possibility, and it didn't actually happen. Because in Minnesota in October, sometimes it snows, sometimes it doesn't snow. So it could go either way. That's why we're using might have. Now, if I expected it to snow, I would say it should have snowed. But just because it was a possibility, I can say might have or may have. When we're talking about past certainty, we use must have plus the past participle of the verb. For example, the whole wedding went really well. God must have been helping us a lot. So must have been here. This is talking about certainty in the past, but it's something that we can't directly prove. So we're almost 100% sure that it's true, but we can't prove that that's what happened. Now, when we're talking about something that we wish happened in the past, but it didn't actually happen, so a desire for something to change, we use should have plus the past participle of the main verb. So I said here past regret. Regret means usually when you're sad about something that didn't happen or you wish you could change it. But sometimes with the should have, we have no control over what happened. So the example here, there were some things I would have changed though. For example, I should have prepared a speech for the reception. Should have prepared. That means that I wish I could change that about the past because I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't even think about it. And I go, oh man, I should have done that. That means I wish or I desire that I could change that thing, but I can't because it already happened. It's in the past. That's why it's called hypothetical. So let's look at these in a real context. So far, I've been using the context of my wedding because this month is my wife and I's 17th anniversary. But let's look at a real example from a book, and we're going to look at the beginning of this book called Because of Winn-Dixie, and it's a fun and cute book about a little girl and her dog that she finds. So the beginning of chapter 1 starts like this. My name is India Opal Bologna, and last summer my daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes, and I came back with a dog. This is what happened. I walked into the produce section of the Winn-Dixie grocery store to pick out my 2 tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. He was standing there all red-faced, screaming and waving his arms around. Who let a dog in here? He kept on shouting. Who let a dirty dog in here? At first, I didn't see a dog. There were just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor, tomatoes and onions and green peppers. And there was what seemed like a whole army of Winn-Dixie employees running around waving their arms just the same way the store manager was waving his. And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog and ugly, and he looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out, and he was wagging his tail. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile, but that is what he did. He pulled back his lips and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off a display, and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog!" The dog went running over to the manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. You could tell that all he wanted to do was get face to face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having in the produce department. But somehow he ended up knocking the manager over, and the manager must have been having a bad day, because lying there on the floor, right in front of everybody, he started to cry. The dog leaned over him, real concerned, and licked his face. "Please," said the manager, "somebody call the pound." "Wait a minute," I hollered. "That's my dog. Don't call the pound." All the Winn-Dixie employees turned around and looked at me, and I knew I had done something big, and maybe stupid too. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't let that dog go to the pound. "Here, boy," I said. All right, so let's go back to the beginning of this story and look at the different verb tenses that are being used. So my name is India Opal Bologna. Here they're using the present simple because she's talking in the present. So this is the beginning point of the story. So this is still true. And remember, we use the present simple for something that's generally true. And last summer, my daddy, the preacher, so last summer, we have this telling us that now we're going to be talking about the past. My daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store. So sent, this is the verb send, this is past simple, for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes. And I came back, this is past simple, with a dog. This is what happened. So this is, here they're using the present simple again because it's a fact, something that's true even now. But they say what happened because it happened in the past simple. I walked into the produce section, so walked, past simple, of the Winn-Dixie grocery store to pick out my 2 tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. So bumped is past simple. He was standing there all red-faced, screaming and waving his arms around. So was standing, screaming, waving. These are past progressive. They're just all connected together, and that's why we don't see the helping verb for each of them. So they're using past progressive because this was happening when she came into the store or when she bumped into the guy. So it was something that was happening before she even came to the situation. That's why they're using the past progressive. Who let a dog in here? He kept on shouting. So they're quoting the manager, and he's using the past simple and kept on shouting. So kept on shouting, it's technically past simple, but you'll see they added the ing here. And the author does this a lot. The author, she uses the ing form a lot with other verbs because it's like she's trying to help us to think about this like it's happening right now, like the action is still happening. Who let a dirty dog in here? So again, we have the past simple. At first, I didn't see a dog. So didn't see, past simple. There were just a lot of vegetables. So were is past simple. Rolling around on the floor, tomatoes and onions and green peppers. So again, she's using ing because she wants us to feel like it's happening at this moment. There was, so past simple, what seemed like, so past simple, a whole army of Winn-Dixie employees running around. So again, using the ing to keep things like active and waving their arms just the same way the store manager was waving his. So we see, again, past progressive because this action was already happening. And then the dog came running. So here, came is in the past simple, but again, she's using it with an ing form. So it's almost like it's past progressive, but it's not with the be verb. It's with a different verb to kind of give it like more specific meaning. So came running. We're using both the idea of coming and running. Around the corner. He was, past simple, a big dog and ugly, and he looked like, so past simple, he was having, there's past progressive, a real good time because this was happening before she got there. So this is a long action in the past. His tongue was hanging, so again, past progressive, and he was wagging his tail, past progressive. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. So these are short actions. Skidded and smiled. So he was having a good time, he was hanging out, he was wagging his tail. Those were long actions. But then he came to her and it said he skidded or slipped and to a stop and smiled. So these are 2 short actions. So the ing ones are long actions and these 2 are short actions. That's why they're using the past simple for those ones. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile. So here we get to see had never before in my life seen. This is the past perfect because she said never before in my life. So seen a dog smile. So at this moment, she's seeing the dog smile, but before this, she had never seen a dog smile. So she's comparing 2 things in the past, seeing the dog smile at that moment and all of the time before that in her life. So this happened first, so she's using had never before seen. This is past perfect. But that is what he did. So again, past simple. He pulled back, so pulled back, past simple, his lips and showed me his teeth, past simple. Then he wagged his tail, past simple, so hard that he knocked, past simple, some oranges off a display, and they went rolling. So again, we see this past simple, but they're using it with an ing verb. Everywhere, mixing, ing, in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. The manager screamed, past simple, somebody grabbed that dog. Now they're quoting him, so this is in the present. You'll see that when they're quoting them, a lot of the time it's in the present. The dog went running, so again we see a past simple verb, but they're using it with an ing verb. Over to the manager, wagging his tail, ing, and smiling, ing, because they're trying to keep it active storytelling. He stood up, past simple, on his hind legs. You could tell. Here we have could tell. This is past possibility. Means you were able to tell that all he wanted to do was to get face-to-face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having. So was having, past progressive, in the produce department, but somehow he ended up, so this is past simple, knocking, but they're using it with ing, knocking the manager over. So again, we see a lot of these times where they're using the ing with a different verb before it. And again, it makes it more specific. So it's like the past progressive, but they're using it connected with other actions. The manager must have been having a bad day. So must have been. This was the past certainty. So it says he must have been having a bad day. They're using it with the progressive because lying there on the floor right in front of everybody, he started to cry. So must have been having a bad day. So she's sure about this. She's almost 100% sure that this is true, but the only reason she knows it is because lying there on the floor, right in front of everybody, he started to cry. Because he started to cry on the floor. So because he started to cry, she's guessing that he must have been having a bad day. So she's talking about something she was sure about in the past, but she didn't have direct proof. She was only looking at the fact that he was crying. The dog leaned over him, real concerned, and licked his face. So leaned over, past simple, and licked, past simple. Please, said the manager, somebody call the pound. So said, past simple. Here, call, present, because they're quoting him. Wait a minute, I hollered. So they're in the present again, because they're quoting. Hollered is past simple, because that's what she did. To holler is to yell something. That's my dog. So present simple, because they're quoting her. Don't call the pound, present, because they're quoting her. All the Winn-Dixie employees turned around, so turned, past simple, and looked at me, past simple. And I knew, past simple, I had done, past perfect. Because she's talking about, at this point, she knew about something that happened before this, so had done. So she did this first, and then this happened second. She had done something big and maybe stupid too, but I couldn't help it. So here we have past ability. So she didn't have the ability to stop it from happening. I couldn't let that dog go to the pound, so she didn't have the ability to do this. Here, boy, I said. So I said, past simple. Here, boy, she's calling the dog to her. All right, so this is just one example of, you can see here the variety of verb tenses that they're using just in the beginning of this chapter. So that's it for this presentation on the narrative verb tenses. Thanks for watching.